Do you play board games with your kids? And in that case, what games do you play with them? I've actually received a new game to my collection. This is Catan Junior. And my kids really like this. This is a light game, of course, it's a children game, but there is still a bunch of strategy in this game. So this is a good game for the kids to get into board gaming and actually understand a bit about what board gaming is actually about. In this video, I am going to show you how to set up this game. I'm going to show you the rules of the game and how to play it. So sit down there and relax and let me take you through this game. Here we have the setup of the game. In the middle of the gaming area we place the board. Just mind which side you have facing up. This side here is the one for 3 and 4 players. The other side of this board is the one for 2 players. We start by placing one of the different resources in each of the life-saving spots. The rest of the resources goes next to the table. Each player then picks a player color and takes the corresponding parrot. On one side you have the portrait of the parrot you portray. On the other side you have a little player aid, where you can see what resources you need to build the different buildings or to use Polly's help. Each player also takes their little pirate houses, but also the boats in their player colors. Then they place out one building and one boat on one of the starting locations that has the same color as your player color. Each player also takes one wood and one sword as their starting resource. Next to the board we have the 16 poly tiles. These should be shuffled real good and put face down next to the table, alongside with the die. In the middle of the player board on the big castle with a number 6, we put Captain Claw. Now we're ready to start playing. The objective of this game is for you to build your little pirate nests here out on the map. The first player to build all of their little buildings is the winner of the game. And you portray as these little parrots. And like I said, you need some resources to be able to build your ships, your little buildings, but also to get some help from Polly. And Polly is quite powerful, so that is a good one to keep in mind. During your turn, you could choose to build, you could choose to trade, or you could, as I said, choose to use Polly. But how do you actually do that? And how do you gain resources? Well, each player takes their turn, and at the start of their turn they get to roll their die. After they have rolled the die, we get to see if we can take any resources. So at the start of a player's turn they need to roll the die, and depending on which number they get on the die, they will be able to get different resources. And it is not just the player rolling the die that gets to take the resources. Other people might be able to get resources as well. So if we, for example, roll number 3, in this case the blue player, but also the red player, would get some wood resources. How much wood they get depends on how many pirate buildings they have around that resource. In this case, the red player and the blue player only have one pirate building, meaning that they would get one wood resource each. But if they had 2 buildings next to the wood resource instead of just one, they would have received 2 wooden resources instead. But it's important for you to remember that this applies to all the players around the table. Meaning that if we roll a number 3, the blue player and the red player would get some wood. But the purple player way over here would actually also get some resources, because they have one building next to the gold, and the gold has a number 3 on them. So they would also get one of these resources. If any of the players that are next to the resources that is rolled and they have several buildings, well then they would get several of that resource. So that was the first thing a player does. They roll this little die, and depending on which number they get, different players might get resources. But what happens if you get number 6? So when a player rolls number 6, we get to move this bad boy, and we can move him to any resource out on the board. If we choose to move him over here, for example, the swords, then the player that rolled number 6 and got to move the little captain here, they get to take 2 of that resource. In this case, 2 swords. But from now on, this captain is blocking this resource. Meaning that next time we roll a number 1, the blue player here will not be able to get any resources. And this applies as long as the captain is standing on that resource. That was the first step of a player's turn, to roll the die. Take a look on the board to see if anyone get resources, or move the little captain out on the board. Now, when we have done that, the player has a bunch of options. They can choose to build a pirate building, they can choose to put out ships, or they can choose to call for Polly's help. And they can choose to do all of these things if they have the resources to pay for it. And they can also choose to do this in any step they would like to. They can choose to trade first, for example, and then call for Polly's help, or build first and then trade, and so on. It's all up to the player. But how do you actually build? So to be able to build a pirate house, you need 1 wood, 1 sheep, 1 pineapple, and 1 sword. But to be able to build a ship, you only need 1 wood and 1 sheep. To be able to call for Polly, you need 1 pineapple, 1 sword, and 1 bag of gold. But when you're going to place out the buildings or the ships, you can't just place them any way you would like to. To be able to build a new ship or a new building, you need the resources, but you also need a spot available to be able to build either the ship or the boat on. To build a ship, you need to place them where there are ship symbols out on the map. And you need to build them right next to one of your buildings. Meaning that if the purple player has the resources available to build a new ship, they can place that ship here, here, or way over here. They choose to place their ship here. The same thing applies if you want to build a pirate building. You need to place that building on the big round spots that are circling the resources. And you need to place your building next to a ship that you own. Meaning that the purple player could not choose to place a building way over here, because they have no ship connecting those 2 spots. But they could choose to place a building here. So in this case, if the purple player, after building a ship, still has resources enough to build a building, they can place that building here. So now the purple player has building next to all of these resources. Meaning that for the rest of the game, whenever any of these numbers are rolled, they would get that resource. And depending on how many houses they have that is connected to that resource, they would get that amount of resources. For example, in a future turn, if anyone rolls a number 5, they would get 3 sheeps. But if anyone rolls 3, they would get 2 golds. But if anyone rolls 4, they would only get 1 pineapple, because they only have 1 building next to that resource. And that's the way you build buildings or ships. You need to have the resources, you need to have the right location out on the map to be able to place them out. And this might seem really easy, but there is a lot of strategy behind placing out your ships and buildings. You can block other players and also keep in mind what resources you need to get in future turns. Now, besides building, you can also pay resources to call for Polly's help. But what does Polly do? Depending on which tile you draw, different things will happen. If you draw a tile looking like this, you would get the resources stated on that tile. But if you get a tile with these symbols here, you would get to build a building or a ship. But if you get this one here, you get to move the captain out on the board and place them on any resource you would like to, and then take 2 of that resource. But Polly actually have one more cool little feature, because if you are the first player to use her help, you get to put out one of your little pirate buildings on the captain's home spot. Because now the captain is all confused running around and he isn't home. Polly helps you to build one building on his spot instead. But if or whenever another player gets more poly tiles than you have, well then unfortunately your house goes away and they get to put out their house instead. So be sure to always try to have more tiles on your hand than other players have, so you get to keep your little building there. The last thing a player can choose to do during their turn is to trade. And they can choose to either take one of the resources they have in front of them and trade it against any one that are located on the rescue spot. Meaning that I could take one wood to change it in for one pineapple. I place my resources in the spot where I take the pineapple. Or I could choose to take two identical resources from my pile and change it in for anything that is located in the storage compartment. Meaning that if I have, for example, 2 wood, I could take that to change it in for 1 sword. But I only get to take one of the resources that I want to have back. So I exchange 2 identical to take 1. Or I change one on the rescue spots to get another one back. And this is a good way for you to fill out the space where you might not have the resources needed to be able to build your little buildings or ships out on the map. And that's how you play Catan Junior. The player starts by taking the die, rolling it, and then see if they or someone else will get some resources. And then they can build whatever they would like to, if they have the resources, or call for Polly's help, and might even do some trading during their turn. There is a little version here where you can do the game just a little bit more advanced by enable trading between the players as well. And again, you can do this in any way you would like to during your turn, which is quite flexible. And this is the way the game goes on until one player managed to get all of their buildings out on the map. As soon as this happened, the game ends and that player is the winner of the game. I enjoyed sitting down with my kids and playing this game a lot. It was a lot of fun. My girl, who is 5 years old, needed a little bit of help with thinking out how she should place her building and setting up a strategy. But besides that, well, they really just sat down and started to play the game. It took no time to teach them the game, and it took no time at all to set it up and start playing, which is a good thing when you're playing with kids, because they have a really short attention span. And even though the game is not that hard to learn, there is still a bit of strategy here when you place out the buildings. So it's not just sit down and just throw some dice and see who wins. There is strategy in this game. There are different ways to win, which makes it quite a lot of fun for the adult ones as well. And if you have older kids like my son, he's 8 and up for 9, 10 and 11 years old, I think that if you play this game with them, you would have quite a battle to be able to win the game. The artwork in this game is light, it's fun, it's bright colors, there's no text in here, so it's completely language independence. There's not too much things going out on the board, so it's easy for the kids to fast look at the board and understand what the different symbols means. And there's not that many symbols either. I mean, you have the ones on the little player board here showing you what resources you need, but it is not hard for the kids to interpret this and understand what they need to do to be able to do what they have to win the game. So it's quite child friendly, it is bright colors, it is light, and it is fun artwork all the way. There you have it, my friend. That was Catan Junior for you. This is a nice game to play with kids and family. If you want to get your kids into board gaming, I think that this is a nice step. But they would need to be at least 5-6 years and upwards. And if they are 5 or 6 years, they might need a little bit help just to figure out the strategy. Then the rest will just go by itself. This is a cool game. I also want to give a shout out to Rob from Ely River Game, who actually gave this game as a Christmas gift to me. Or my kids I mean, of course. Thank you so much, Rob. We love this game. This was a great piece for us, our collection. If you want to know more about this game, I will put down links down in the description, so be sure to check that out. If you want to watch more of Genders Gaming, well, why not subscribe to the channel? Give me a comment here. Do you play with your kids, and what games do you play with your kids? I want to know that. Until next time, my friend, please keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace.